Welcome, everybody, to Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. Your hosts are Dr. Michael Akinfora, Dr. Wanda Lee McPhee, and Dr. Noah DeCoyer. Over 7 years ago, the three of us got together as an accountability group. And just 2 years ago, in December 2014, the three of us created a business called the Center of Epigenetic Expression. For those of you who aren't familiar with epigenetic or epigenetic expression, epigenetics means beyond or above the genes, meaning you do not have to live within the confines of your genetic makeup, and that environmental factors play a huge role in how your genes are expressed. Now, when we look at the World Health Organization definition of health, they state that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Again, the three stressors are physical, chemical, and emotional stress. Dr. Mike, if I was to ask you, when you think of physical stress, what comes to mind and what are some examples?
Great question, Dr. Noah. The thoughts of physical stress, and me growing up playing football and sports, are injuries. And that's the first one that comes to mind when I'm looking at physical stress. But it can come in the form, for example, of, let's say, children, where they're learning to walk and they fall. Or it can be something as simple as, I don't know, maybe shoveling snow, which Wanda Lee knows a lot about living up in Canada. So when I think of that injury and what our foundational core of what we do is in chiropractic. And chiropractic has been not founded on, but it has been used with tremendous results when it comes to physical injuries. It is not the only thing that we do, but it is something that we do as chiropractors extremely well.
Now, Dr. Mike, you're talking about athletic injuries, waking up and bending over and hurting your back, even things like headaches, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's what we see in our office day in and day out. This is what we have phenomenal results with. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for what chiropractors do.
So when people think of chiropractors, they often think of the spine because we are so hands-on when it comes to looking at the spine and the spinal condition and the health of the spine. So why is it that the spine is so important when it comes to physical well-being?
That's another great question. And here's an interesting thing that I just want to read to you. Research by the Nobel Prize winning Roger Sperry revealed the relationship of spinal movement to brain function. Now again, there's a relationship between the movement in your spine and brain function. And he used the analogy of the spine in relationship to the brain, acting like a windmill that generates electricity for the power plant. So what he was saying, and this guy was brilliant. He said that the more structurally distorted we are, the less energy is available for healing, thinking, and metabolism. Now, I don't know about you, but I want some of that because that is just genius. And when we can correct the misalignments in the spine, what we see is greater and clearer thinking, quicker ability to heal, and our metabolism actually improves. So that's what I see when we talk about this physical stress and how some solutions to this physical stress.
So Dr. Mike, when you said physical stresses and related them to injury, obviously that's really common. But what about the everyday kind of micro traumas? Sometimes it's harder for people to imagine that the way they sit in their chair over time is a physical stress.
Well, absolutely. And that's why we have started this podcast. Is our plan is to bring in the brightest minds and talk about these things. Sitting, our culture today is one that we're no longer out in the fields, but we're sitting at a desk. And that is a huge micro trauma that adds up over 40 hours a week, over 30 years of working. And what we wind up seeing is people that are coming in to our office from not having any significant trauma, but something as small as just sitting at a desk. So this is where the physical stress and our solution is visit your chiropractor. So, Dr. Noah, talk to us about the inflammatory process. How does that work when it comes to chemical stress or nutritional stress?
First thing that comes to mind when I think of chemical stress, I think of nutrition. And when I think of nutrition, I think of inflammation or chronic inflammation. And what I visualize in my mind is the time cover from February 23rd, 2004 that says, "The Secret Killer, the surprising link between inflammation and heart attacks, cancer, Alzheimer's, and other disease." What that's saying is that chronic inflammation in your body is the cause of nearly all the diseases that are bankrupting our health care dollars and our health care system. And the way to reduce chronic inflammation, or one of the most important ways to reduce chronic inflammation in your body, is by what you put in your mouth every day. And by what I mean by putting in your mouth, or what do you put in your mouth, I mean you have to eat a whole foods diet and eliminate things that create those inflammatory process. And that would be, looking at it through a primal paleo ancestral lifestyle, most are all grains, most are all dairy, and all beans. Those are the three things that for most people create an enormous amount of inflammation. And what we found, and what tons of people have found, when those three things are removed from your diet, inflammatory markers reduce, things like heart attack and heart disease reduce, cancer rates reduce, and people just live a healthier, less inflamed life.
So other than nutrition, what sort of chemical stressors are we also bombarded with in our everyday lives?
Oh, that's the second component. It's just as important. Dr. Mike and I live in the metro New York City area, and that's considered one of the most toxic areas to live in the world because of the amount of pollution that is spewed on top of us every single day. So it's air pollution is a chemical stressor. For women, it's their makeup and what they're putting on their face and under their arms and on their skin every single day. There are tons and tons of heavy metals and other chemicals in makeup that really affect our health and create inflammation. And then the final piece is cleaning products, ammonias and Lysol wipes and all these triclosan. These disrupt our body in ways that are just beginning to be found, and we're just beginning to understand what they do. We know that triclosan affects how our hormones work, and triclosan is the cleaner that they put in most facial cleaners. And we know ammonias and Lysol wipes and Lysol is very, very, very rough on our respiratory system. And another chemical stressor is simply when most of us take a shower every day or twice a day, and we're either with chlorine, we're either washing chlorine over our body, or even worse is when we take a hot shower and steam is created, we're actually inhaling chlorine. So there is a ton of chemical stressors in our environment and in our homes.
Dr. Noah, that was just brilliant. Thank you. So, Dr. Wanda Lee, let's talk a little bit about emotional and spiritual well-being. Can you tell us some foundational issues regarding emotional or spiritual stress?
Well, when people hear the word stress, they often immediately think of the emotional part. You know, we've talked a little bit about physical and chemical. That may stretch people's minds a little bit, but in terms of emotional stress, well, we often just call that stress. You know, we even have incorporated into our language. We'll say, he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, or she's a pain in the neck, or things like that. So we know that emotional stress has a toll on our body and how we're expressing ourselves. one mentor that I've studied with says that there are two key human fears that create the seeds of some of these emotional challenges that people have. Number one is the thought that I am not enough. And number two is the idea that if you knew that I'm not enough, you wouldn't love me. And because of these two underlying emotional fears, it creates, masks or beliefs or inaccurate observations about ourselves, what we're worth, what someone else thinks about us. And this is the root of a lot of emotional stress for people. When the truth really is, we are all enough and we are all worthy of love. And any beliefs that we're holding is just some thought we keep thinking. And at best, it's untrue or incomplete. But we've been thinking this because of some outside influence, some mother, father, teacher, preacher, something we read, something we saw, something we misinterpreted. So giving us a chance to look at emotional stress, figuring out where it's coming from and how we can change our thinking is really a key to full body wellness.
And what are some of the things that people can do to help improve their mental or emotional state?
Well, we're going to be looking forward to talking to tons of experts in this area over our podcast, but three really key things that I think people could take away today are changing your physiology. We all know that if we move or dance or breathe differently or lie down or do some yoga or meditate, whatever works for each individual person, we can change how we're thinking. We all know that if we're having a bad day and we go for a walk, we feel better. In fact, the research shows that going for a 40-minute walk works better than Prozac when someone's anxious. So we know that changing our physiology changes the stress hormones in our body and changes the way our brain is actually going to wire. So that's an easy one for everybody. Number two, changing your focus. Just breaking that thought cycle out, looking for a win or a positive thought or a benefit to what's happening rather than getting stuck into the drama and bogged down where things have gotten stuck. If we can take a step back and look at the bigger picture, or at the very least maybe step away for a little while, leave the problem on the table and divert yourself and come back with a different focus later. And the third really easy thing to do is to change your language. Changing your story is a really good way to just reset those pathways of emotional stress. De-escalate the story, de-escalate the drama, rather than feeding into it or repeating what you don't want over and over and over again. Choose different words to talk about an issue or something that's holding you emotionally hostage. And finally, just ask yourself, if someone else was talking about someone you love the way you're talking about yourself, would you let them get away with it? Often we're the hardest on ourselves, and maybe it's time to just take a step back and look at the language you're using with yourself. Emotional stressors are a key component of wellness, and which genes get turned on and get turned off have to do with how we treat our bodies physically, chemically, and emotionally. And we are the ones ultimately in control of that.
Wandali, that was fantastic. Thanks so much for that. So when we look at what we're doing here with this podcast, it's basically looking at a three-legged stool with the physical, chemical, and emotional parts of it. And we want to try and balance that. And chiropractic is one of the few professions that actually addresses all three. So we're going to look to bring experts on that will help you and give you the tools to have a better life. And that is why we've decided to bring Beyond Your Wildest Genes to the public. You can find us on iTunes at Beyond Your Wildest Genes, and we're pleased to announce that our first podcast that we interview will be with Miss Amanda Campbell from Australia. The company is Bend Like Bamboo and Nourish, and she will talk about sports kinesiology. So we're thrilled to have her on, and we look forward to connecting with you folks. And thank you very much for listening. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.